We shall commence this module by discussing the role of expectations. Role of expectations in economics is similar to the role of expectations in any other subject in the world. Expectations reflect people's belief of how certain variables will react in the future. Economic agents cannot predict precisely what will happen in the future. They cannot tell for surely what will be the inflation rate tomorrow, what will be the exchange rate, what will be the fiscal or monetary policy tomorrow. They can only predict future events on the basis of the information that they have in the present and what they have experienced in the past. They form beliefs about the future. Future is uncertain and economists do forecasting about the values that a variable will take in the future. However, these are probabilistic solutions, that is, the probability of a forecast being correct lie between 0 and 1. In macroeconomics, role of expectations was first discussed by J. M. Keynes in his book The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money in 1936. He formed the basis for understanding the expectations and future uncertainties in the determination of output and employment level in the economy. Later on, many post-Keynesian economists came up with different theories of expectations which will be studied in the later modules. To understand why it is important to study the expectations in macroeconomics, consider a simple example. A new technology of production comes up which might make the currently installed machinery obsolete. Though with this new technology, it becomes easier for the firms to produce more at a lower cost, but the new machinery is costly. This makes the firms to invest more in their production process, increasing the investment demand at the current interest rates. If the economy is already operating at the full employment level, then this new technology will have no effect on the level of output produced, but will only increase the price level in the economy. However, if the economy is operating below full employment, this new technology will increase the aggregate output produced in the economy. Price level will change depending upon where the economy is operating on the aggregate supply curve. Thus, it is important to understand the role of expectations in macroeconomics. In this module, we will study the importance of expectations in the Keynesian ISLM framework and how the expectations affect the aggregate demand, output and employment in the economy. We will also study how these expectations are formed and what are the different theories of expectations in macroeconomics. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the concept of expectations, understand why the expectations are important in macroeconomics, understand how the expectations affect the ISLM curves, consumption demand, government expenditure and labor supply decisions of workers, identify the channels through which expectations affect the aggregate demand curve, study the two types of expectation hypothesis, adaptive expectation hypothesis and rational expectation hypothesis. Let us now move on and discuss the role of expectations in Keynesian ISLM framework. According to Keynes, IS curve is highly volatile and LM curve is horizontal. Output in the economy is determined by the position of the IS curve and economy operates below full employment level in the situation of liquidity trap. Why do Keynesians hold this view? The answer is clear, and it lies in the formation of the future expectations by the economic agents, especially the firms who invest and the general public who holds cash balances. Thus, there are two sources through which expectations affect the ISLM model. One, through volatile investment demand by firms. Two, by highly responsive money demand to the rate of interest by the general public. Keynes held the view that the investors are not sure about the profitability of their investment in the future. Future returns to the current investment are highly volatile. Because of this volatility, there are large fluctuations in the IS curve, leading to large and undesirable fluctuations in the aggregate output and employment. Keynes called this behavior of forming future expectations about the profitability as animal spirits. According to Atfield, Demery and Duck in 1992, Keynes explained these animal spirits in the following manner. Most of our decisions to do something positive can only be taken as a result of animal spirit, of a spontaneous urge to action rather than inactive, and not as the outcome of a weighted average of the quantitative benefits multiplied by the quantitative probabilities. Enterprises only pretends to itself to be mainly actuated by the statement in its own prospectus, however candid and sincere. Only a little more than an expedition to the South Pole is it based on an exact calculation of benefits to come. Thus, if animal spirits are dimmed and the spontaneous optimism falters, enterprises will fade and die. Though the fears of loss may have a basis no more reasonable than hopes of profits had before. Thus, firms, in the hopes of remaining what they are in at the times of crisis and to avoid their downturn, make their investment in a highly volatile manner, making the IS curve volatile. If these fluctuations in the investment demand is counterbalanced by the equal change in the government expenditure, then the fluctuations in the IS curve could have been reduced. But changing the fiscal policy quite often to offset the changes in the investment demand may not be feasible for the smooth functioning of any government machinery. Thus, Keynesian assumed that IS curve is volatile because firms form expectations about the future profitability of their investments. If in the above scenario, LM curve was vertical as in the classical case, any changes in the IS curve due to the changes in the investment demand will definitely only had an effect on the interest rates without having any effect on the aggregate output and employment. However, LM curve is horizontal in the Keynesian case, or the economy is in the liquidity trap. Keynes held the view that a typical individual had some expectations about the future interest rates. If he expects the interest rates to rise in future, he would like to sell bonds today, making the price of bonds to fall. Keynes argued that there is some minimum rate of interest for each individual called the critical rate of interest, which is so low that he is indifferent between holding the bonds and cash balances. If the interest rate falls below this critical level, the cost of holding these bonds to an individual just outweighs the interest earned on them. The individual will prefer to hold cash balances rather than the bonds. Thus, at this critical rate of interest, money demand becomes highly responsive to the changes in the interest rates. It is this high responsiveness of money demand to the changes in the interest rates, which makes the LM curve horizontal and makes the economy to operate in the situation of liquidity trap. If future expectations for an individual about interest rates change very rapidly in response to the changes in the actual interest rates, then money demand may not be highly responsible to the interest rates. However, Keynesian economists believed that expectations do not change as quickly as the actual interest rates, and they also believed that expected interest rates are constant. Thus, according to them, LM curve is horizontal. Hence, expectations affect the ISLM framework through two sources. One, highly volatile expectations about future profitability to firms, IS curve highly volatile. 2, near constant expectations about future interest rates when actual interest rates are volatile, making the money demand highly responsive to the interest rates and LM curve horizontal. Thus, expectations affect the aggregate output and income in the economy by producing the large shifts in the aggregate demand curve. Next, we shall discuss the role of expectations in Keynesian consumption function. According to Keynes, consumption of an individual is related to his income by the consumption function given as follows. Capital C is equals to capital C bar plus small c y, where capital C is equals to consumption demand, capital C bar is equals to autonomous consumption, small c is equals to marginal propensity to consume, and y is the income. Expectations plays a role in this consumption function through the income of a person. This phenomenon is given in permanent income hypothesis of consumption that argues that consumption is not only related to an individual's current income but to his permanent income. Milton Friedman introduced the concept of permanent income in his 1957 book named A Theory of the Consumption Function. Thus, the equation will become capital C is equals to capital C bar plus small c yp, where yp stands for permanent income. Dornbusch and Fisher define the permanent income as follows. They define that the steady rate of consumption a person could maintain for the rest of his or her life given the present level of wealth and income earned now and in the future. Thus, permanent income is the income that the person expects to earn during his entire life. According to Friedman, consumption depends on the expected value of the permanent income. Since an individual does not know what his future income will be, he makes guesses about his future income. He then forms some ideas about the level of his consumption based on his expected permanent income. Now, if a person's income goes up, he may not be sure whether this is a rise in his permanent income or is it merely a positive transitory shock to his income. If it was a rise in his expected permanent income, consumption expenditure will also rise as given by the consumption function. But if this rise in income is not the rise in expected permanent income, the person will not raise his consumption demand. As a result, there will be a disequilibrium in the goods market, which is referred back to the ISLM framework. To correct for this disequilibrium, government will intervene to increase the government expenditure and to stimulate the economy's aggregate demand. However, this increase in government expenditure will further increase the actual output and income in the economy. If the individual is assuming that his consumption function is given by equation 1, then he will increase his consumption demand as explained by Keynes' consumption multiplier. However, if the individual is assuming that his consumption function is given by equation 2, there will be no change in the consumption demand as there is no change in the expected permanent income of this individual. Thus, the way in which individuals in the economy make expectations about their permanent incomes affect not only their own consumption demand, but also affect the fiscal policy changes, which in turn affect the aggregate demand and the output in the economy. Moving on to discuss the role of expectations in labor supply decisions. How expectations play a role in affecting the labor supply decisions of workers is related to the workers' misperception theory that workers are more interested in the real wages that they get, that is W by P, and not the nominal wages, that is W. What workers decide in their labor contracts and what they receive in hand is their nominal wages. While deciding on their nominal wages, workers are unaware about the price level that will prevail in the economy in the future. They are unaware about the price level that will prevail in the economy when they will actually get their wages and when they actually start spending it. Thus, Friedman argued that workers form expectations about the general price level in the economy. So, rather than W by P, they are concerned about W by P to the power E, where P to the power E is the expected price level. If they think that their expected real wages are high, they will supply more labor, otherwise they will not. Consider an example. Suppose there is an increase in demand in the economy, which increases the price level and is making the firms to supply more goods. Firms have to meet the increased demand by producing more. So, they offer higher nominal wages to lure the workers to supply more labor or to hire new workers. If the workers correctly perceive that the increase in their nominal wage rates is due to the increase in the price level, they will not supply more labor as their real wages are same. If the workers wrongly perceive that the increase in their nominal wages is an increase in their real wages, they will supply more labor, increasing the aggregate employment and output in the economy. Thus, workers' expectations about the price level can affect the aggregate output and employment in the economy. Let us understand the need for an expectation theory. From the last 3 sections, we get to know that expectations affect the aggregate demand and output in the economy through 3 channels. First is making investment demand highly volatile and hence IS curve highly volatile, making LM curve horizontal by making the money demand highly responsive to the interest rates. Second is affecting the consumption demand. Third is affecting the labor supply decisions of workers by changing their expected real wages. Thus, studying theories on expectations is important in macroeconomics. According to Keynes, day-to-day fluctuations in the profits of existing investments which are obvious of an ephemeral and non-significant character tend to have an altogether excessive and even an absurd influence on the market. In the next section, we will discuss the problems in making of theories of expectations and the two theories of forming expectations. Let us now discuss the nature and formation of theories of expectations. Expectation really means beliefs about the future, which could differ from person to person. One person may expect the price level to rise by 10% in the next period, while another person might expect the price level to rise by 20%. Forming expectation is a difficult task because what is true under one situation may not be true under essentially similar conditions. For example, consider a toss of an unbiased coin. After repeatedly tossing the coin, one can form a probability distribution of, say, getting a head. Given this distribution, one can form the expectation about what the occurrence of head in the next toss. According to Keynes, while forming the expectations about the future, there are no objective probability distribution where we could feed in the probability of different outcomes and values of the variable of interest to get the forecasted future value. In the above example of repeatedly tossing a coin, one could control for factors like nature of coin and method of toss. However, one cannot control the exact initial position of the coin, the exact power with which the coin is tossed, the exact velocity with which the wind was blowing near the coin when the coin was tossed, and other minute details. Thus, Keynes argues that while forming expectations, not all factors can be quantifiable and controlled for. Thus, an objective probability distribution for forming the expectations rarely exists. Thus, in forming the long-term expectations, generally policymakers fall back on the conventions based on the historical data. For instance, in predicting the price level in period t plus 1, economists might use the price level in period t, t minus 1, t minus 2 and so on. However, farther one goes in the future, expectations will become more arbitrary. Using the historical data might be good for predicting variables in near future, but not in the distant future. Moreover, these conventions may not always be correct. The decision to go by these conventions depend on the state of confidence. This confidence level in using conventional methods depend on psychological factors which are again highly volatile. Thus, expectations are highly volatile and forming expectations about the future is a very difficult task. What economists need is a theory of expectations that is generally applicable, tested, and which allows to estimate the macroeconomic variables and relationships among them, while including uncertainty regarding future. There are two main theories that are studied in macroeconomics. These are adaptive expectation hypothesis and rational expectation hypothesis. Though there are different modules for these theories, we will just describe them here very briefly. A. Adaptive expectation hypothesis, known as AEH. Adaptive expectation hypothesis is given by Kagan, wherein individuals form their expectations on the basis of the past behavior. In other words, a person will change his expectation of any variable if there is a difference between what he was expecting the value of variable to be last period and what is actually was the last period. This change of expectation will be a fraction of the difference between the last period's actual value and the expected value. The following equation gives a simple representation of the adaptive expectation. PTE minus PT minus 1E is equals to alpha times bracket PT minus 1 minus PT minus 1 to the power E bracket close. This is equation 3, where PT minus 1 is equals to actual price level in the last period, Pt minus 1E is equals to the expected price level for the last period. Pte is the expected price level for the current period. Alpha stands for the parameter with which expectations are revised, where alpha is less than 1. B. Rational expectation hypothesis, popularly known as REH. Rational expectation hypothesis is given by John Muth in the year 1961. According to this hypothesis, individuals as rational agents form their expectations using all the information that is available at the time of forming their expectations. In addition to the past values of the variable of interest, rational expectations are formed using the information on other variable of interest as well. The following equation describes the representation of rational expectations. Capital ET minus 1 bracket PT bracket close is equals to alpha naught plus alpha 1 PT minus 1 plus alpha 2 xt minus 1 plus alpha 3 zt minus 1. This is given as equation 4, where Et minus 1 bracket Pt bracket close is equals to expectation for the current price level on the basis on all available information till the last period. Pt minus 1 is the price level in the last period. Xt minus 1 and zt minus 1 are the information on other variables in the economy. Alpha naught, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 stands for the parameters of the model. Now, we will summarize what we have studied and discussed in this module. Expectations in the economics means views and beliefs of people about future macroeconomic variables like prices, interest rates, etc. Future is uncertain, and hence expectations play an important role in affecting the aggregate demand and output in the economy. Expectations make investment demand highly volatile, making IS curve to shift very frequently. Expectations make the money demand highly responsive to the interest rates, making LM curve horizontal. Expectations about permanent income affect the consumption demand, which has implications for the fiscal policy changes. Expectations about the price level in the future affect the labor supply decisions of the workers. There are two main theories of the expectations known as adaptive expectation hypothesis and rational expectation hypothesis.